Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello, and thanks for downloading Beyond the Balls. You're listening to our 16th episode. Beyond the Balls is a co-production between Women's Sport Australia and Wisp Sports. We're your hosts, Ella Smith and Georgina Mallon, here to discuss all the topics on women's sport off the pitch. Hey Georgina, how are you today?
Hey Ella, I'm good. How are you?
Really good. Very excited again for our guest today.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So today we welcome Tiffany Melius, a competitive Australian rock climber, currently based in North Vancouver, Canada. Having climbed for over 20 years, Tiffany has spent over 10,000 hours climbing and has competed in over 100 competitions. In 2016, Tiffany became the Australian Women's Bouldering Champion, and in 2017 became the Oceania Continental Climbing Champion. At the Tokyo 2021 Games, sport climbing will be included for the first time, with one spot for one male and one spot for a female to qualify from Oceania. Very recently, Tiffany has made the difficult decision to pull out of the Olympics. In addition to her rock climbing commitments, she is also the Executive Director of the New View Mental Health Society and the founder of Force of Nature Coaching. Welcome to the show, Tiffany.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Tiffany, you were a gymnast growing up and at 14 decided to give climbing a go. What was it about your first time climbing that made you want to go, oh, well, this is for me?
That is a good question. I'm not sure I have an answer for it. I've done a lot of interviews, but I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. Honestly, I think the holistic nature of climbing is one of the biggest things that got me into it and has kept me in it, in the sense that, yes, it's a sport, it's a physical undertaking, and there's the challenge of strength and flexibility and dexterity and coordination and all of those things. But there's also the mental challenge, and the mental challenge in climbing includes problem solving. So figuring out how to translate the holds that are on the wall or on the rock with your body to getting to the top. And then there's also the psychological challenge of being able to overcome fear or self-doubt or uncertainty, trusting in your belay when you're route climbing. And then for a lot of people, especially people who climb outdoors, there's also a spiritual aspect, which I'm not sure that played any part in the first time that I climbed, but certainly has subsequently.
Yeah, so there are quite a few different types of climbing. Could you quickly explain what sort of climbing you do?
Absolutely. So the climbing that I do most is competitive climbing, and competitive climbing is on artificial walls. And there are three competitive disciplines: sport climbing, bouldering, and route climbing or lead climbing. So speed climbing is the same route the world over, and essentially the competition is who can get to the top of the wall the fastest. The bouldering is multiple attempts on what we call a boulder problem, which is a range of different combinations of climbing holds. And as I said, you have multiple attempts, but you have 5 minutes per problem, or 4 minutes, depending on the round. And then lead climbing, you get one attempt on the route. It's usually 20 to 30 meters tall, and it's the person who gets the highest on that one attempt, and the route gets progressively harder as you go up the wall.
Yeah, right. And so these will be the sports that will be at the Olympics next year, which will be really interesting to watch. Tiffany, so you live in Canada, and we were chatting about it before off mic, after you left Australia to start a round-the-world trip, which you never really came back from, I guess. What was it about Canada that made you stay? Was it the rock climbing? Was it the people?
To be honest with you, actually, initially it was because I didn't have the money. So Canada was a working stop. It was my third working stop in my round the world tour, and I had separated from my partner. So he stayed in England, which was the last working stop, and I continued the travel to Canada. So I went from having double income saving for the next leg of my trip to try to make it on my own. And it took me quite a while to get back on my feet. And by the time that I had done that, I had this whole amazing climbing community. I had this wonderful work network. I had a new partner who I've now been with almost the entire time I've been in Canada, Simon. I've been with him almost 11 years now. And a group of friends and a support network, and that coupled with beautiful British Columbia, which is the tagline for British Columbia, and Squamish being just 45 minutes from my home in North Vancouver. And Squamish is the outdoor recreation capital of Canada, really has just brought everything together. And it's a bit tough for me sometimes because I feel like I have two homes. I really do miss Australia, especially the beaches and my family and friends there a lot. And for now, at least, Canada really is my home. And the four seasons definitely help. As I'm sitting here in my home office, I'm looking out my window and there's a tree with incredibly vivid red leaves that's making me smile. So...
Oh, there you go. And being from Brisbane yourself, I'm guessing that's quite a change, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I mean, the winter can get very snowy and very cold here, which of course in Brisbane, there isn't anything. There's not four seasons in Brisbane.
There's no winter.
No, there's no winter in Brisbane. And I have ski hills, 15 minutes from my house here. So...
Very different, very different. And I was listening to a speech that you did, and you talked about how you took a bit of time off climbing. Was it in Canada where you got back into it?
Yeah, so I have taken time off climbing at a couple of points. Somebody's got a puppy there.
Sorry.
I love having animals in the background in this time of COVID. Sorry. So I took some time off the first year that I was traveling and got back into it in Japan. I took some time off when I was traveling between Japan and England. And when I was in England, I got back into competition climbing, which was a big thing for me because I really loved comp climbing, but I'd had a not so great experience with it in about 2004, just before I left Australia. And I got back into comp climbing in England. And then when I came to Canada, I really got seriously back into comp climbing. And there were a number of people that I was climbing with and training with who were competing on the World Cup circuit. And that was, for me, the first time that I had thought, oh, maybe I'll do international competition. Maybe I'm good enough. Maybe I'm good enough to do international competitions. So I think Canada is where I got serious about competition climbing and how far I could go with it.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask. I watched the speech you did with Feet Canada where you spoke about that 2004 experience where you did worse than you expected. Or, there was another instance you mentioned where you broke your heel bone from a bouldering accident. And in terms of what you were mentioning before about gaining that self-confidence, how did you do it, especially in a sport that is obviously quite a solo sport? It's quite dangerous, but it also has a relatively uncertain, sustainable career path in relation to other sports.
Yeah, so I'm a very self-reflective person. I've always been a very self-reflective person. And one of my personal values is personal growth. So for me, every experience that I go through, whether it's related to climbing or relationships or work, is an opportunity for learning and growth. And my initial reaction when coming up against some of those challenging experiences is I really try to let myself feel the emotion that's related to it, whatever that might be. Disappointment or grief or whatever comes up. And then once I've allowed myself to feel those feelings, I can then start navigating my way through it. And the navigation is going to look different depending on what the circumstances is, depending on who I am at that point in time, because I also believe that we're constantly evolving and we're not the same person from moment to moment. So getting the confidence back I would say it's not a linear. So you don't just sort of get on the escalator of getting your confidence back and it's just an upward trajectory. I think it goes up and down. And a lot of it has been around self-talk. A lot of it has been tapping into my support network. There's been some really powerful music. One artist, Jason Mraz, really has very positive, uplifting messages in his music. And at various different points in my life, I've taken those messages to heart and they have helped me progress. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
No, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and it's something that's quite interesting, especially with solo athletes, to talk about.
Yeah, and I think, for me, a lot of what I do is processing. So I try to share my journey. I do like Instagram lives. I call them gifts of growth. And I do blogs and all of my process. I'm very transparent and authentic about what I go through. And I hope that by sharing, it can help other people when they're in a similar situation.
Yeah, so Tiffany, in 2016, it was announced that sport climbing was going to be an event at the Tokyo Olympics, with spots for one male and one female to qualify from Oceania. When this was announced, how did you react? And was the decision to go for such a competitive spot an easy one to make?
So it was not straightforward for me, actually. Because in 2016, as you had mentioned previously, I was really focused in my training on the Australian Bouldering Nationals. So I hadn't been back to Australia in 10 years, and I was coming back for the first time to do that competition. Now, when I was back, I actually found a little note that I'd written to myself, which was #1 in Australia in 2006. Now, I was a little bit late for that because I wasn't #1 in Australia in 2006. And so when I made the decision that I was going back for the 2016 Bouldering Championships, everything in my life, all of my focus was on that goal. So when it was announced, I was super excited. It was like, yeah, my sport's going to be in the Olympics. We're going to be recognized, more legitimized as a sport. But I didn't really see how it applied to me. And when I won the Australian Bouldering Nationals, I actually had made the decision to retire from serious competition climbing. I was like, okay, I've come full circle. I've got that one goal that I had that I never fulfilled. That's it. I can stop. And I was 33, which is, getting on a little bit in the athletic world. And I hadn't really considered the Olympics as a path for me. I had done a couple of World Cups, but again, I had kind of thought, oh yeah, I've had that experience. I've achieved that opportunity, semi-final in my first Bouldering World Cup. That's kind of as far as I can go. And it wasn't until about 4 or 5 months after, quote unquote, giving up competition climbing, that I was sitting in the car park of the climbing gym where I went and was at that time climbing for fun. And I couldn't get out of the car. I started bawling, and I didn't know why I was bawling, because the climbing gym is a second home for me. And I didn't want to go in, and I couldn't figure out why. And I couldn't figure out why I was so upset and so miserable. I was like, I've achieved everything I want to achieve, and climbing should be for fun now. And through a process of about 6 hours that evening, I talked to my mum, whom I'm very close to back in Australia. I talked to my best friend here in Canada, and I actually had an appointment with a counsellor. And I realized that there was this little tiny part of me that I hadn't been giving any voice to, that wasn't done with competition climbing, and that wanted to try for the Olympics. And after realizing that, which was a huge relief, because obviously I now knew why I had been so miserable, because inside me there was this conflict going on that I wasn't aware of. It probably took me about 3 months to actually make the decision to do the Olympic bid, because I knew that it was going to be a big change for me. The time and effort and energy and money that was going to go into this bid, the sacrifices I would be making, because I had planned to start trying for a family. The time that I would have to give up, I had just gotten my dream job in 2016. And so knowing that I was going to have to potentially go part-time, and if they wouldn't let me go part-time, that I would have to quit my job to do this. Those were all really, really big things that I needed to consider before deciding on this path. But when I finally made the decision, it was super scary. I can remember the moment that I made the decision and how that felt in my body. And I knew that it was the right decision. And so that's been my last 3 years, my whole life for the last 3 years. So all of that having happened, making the decision to discontinue that Olympic bid has been pretty challenging as well. And that's taken me probably 7 months to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll ask about that whole journey in a second. But I wanted to know first, you mentioned in a YouTube video which announced your Olympic bid that every decision you were going to make for the next 4 years was going to be geared towards whether or not it's serving your goal of making it to the Olympics. And that's, such a commitment, obviously, as you were explaining before. How did you maintain that mentality for 3 years?
I think the biggest motivator for me is when I have a goal, I am all in. And it was not so much that it was an effort to keep making that decision. It was more a constant reevaluation of, is this still what I want? And every day, if I wake up and I'm like, is this still what I want? Then making all of those decisions towards that goal is easy. The actual work of it is not easy, doing the training and going through the self-doubt and the lack of confidence and the highs and the lows, and all of that part is not easy. But having this one focus for all of my decisions, in some ways it's actually much simpler than life. That's one of the things that I found, post my decision is, well, so how do I decide what I do today? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing today when I go to the climbing gym. Oh, what problems do I climb? What routes do I climb? Should I climb something easy? Should I climb something hard? I don't have a training plan that tells me what to do.
You have the choice.
Yeah.
So Tiffany, as we mentioned before, you recently decided to pull out of your bid for the Olympics, and it was a very emotionally driven decision that you've written beautifully about on your blog. Can you tell us a bit about the factors that led to this decision?
So obviously the biggest factor was COVID and the postponement of the qualifiers and the Olympics. The weekend that everything shut down and travel was essentially became an impossibility. My coach, who was in the States, had flown up to Canada, and we were doing my final competition simulation for the qualifier. And then that was on the weekend. And then on the Thursday, I was meant to be flying to Australia for the Oceania Continental Championships. And at that time, I think similar to everybody else, nobody really knew what was going on or how long it was going to last or if the comp would be cancelled, postponed. So I really threw myself into training at home. I didn't have access to a climbing wall. Lots of people have home climbing walls. I didn't have that. I didn't have access to a gym. I had to order. I had two 10-pound dumbbells at home, and I managed to order a 35-pound dumbbell because that was the only like one single dumbbell in all of the online shops that was still there. And I put up a hangboard, which is a piece of training equipment for your fingers and your grip strength. And so I was trying to maintain what I could at home during the initial lockdown period. And the big thing that I noticed during that was how much climbing is the thing that I love in my training, and the rest of it serves the climbing, but it in and of itself is not what I really enjoy. And so that was a hard period to go through. Mentally, it was hard, obviously the uncertainty of it. And then when the climbing gyms opened up again, I was able to go back and like go back to some of that training that I actually really loved. And then we found out that the Continental Championships were going to be postponed. Well, that the Olympics had been postponed. They made that decision fairly early on, and it was being postponed to 2021, and that the qualifier was being postponed to December. And at that time, I really had to take a pause. I'm turning 37 in a few days, and I have a job, and that job went back to being full-time when COVID hit, because as the leader of my organization, I also had to lead the COVID response, make sure that we were continuing services to our clients and members, and which is everybody's, I think, being challenged by their mental health at this time. So people who already have a mental illness are feeling it in a way more exacerbated way. So I had to take a pause when I heard about all of this delay and be like, okay, well, my timeline for my training and sustaining the effort and putting off a family was all going to be done in March if I didn't qualify, and then in August if I did qualify. And now we're looking at a whole other year. And I didn't make the decision at that time. I actually made a really conscious choice to continue training, but at a different pace. So to really prioritize my self-care, because I have had some really challenging periods with my own mental health over the last few years. So I prioritized self-care, said, okay, well, I'll keep planning to go to qualifiers in December. And I will consciously stay in the uncertainty, because as I mentioned before, personal growth is a strong value of mine. And I could have made the decision early on and gotten rid of that uncertainty. Said, like, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to be in this uncertainty anymore. I'm quitting. But I felt that there was a lot of value for me in learning how to deal with the uncertainty and becoming comfortable in the uncertainty. And so I didn't make the decision for quite a long time. And I think for me, the deciding factor was my sister's actually living in Vancouver at the moment. And I had just this amazing, amazing day with her. And then I had dinner with my best friend and her daughter, who I'm in love with her daughter. And coming out of that day, the next morning I woke up and I just had this feeling in my heart that was where I wanted to be spending my time and energy. And I've put a lot of my relationships on the back burner. Again, for this 3-year period or 4-year period that I was planning to be, that was the timeline that I'd given myself. And when that timeline got messed up, I just didn't really want it anymore. And it sounds, I judge myself as I'm saying that. I'm not a capricious person. I'm not somebody who changes their mind once they've set the parameters, but the parameters changed. It's like I had my finish line for my race, and then the finish line got moved and it disappeared for a little while, and then they brought it back, but it was further along. And I just made the decision that something off my racetrack was more important than getting to the finish line.
And that decision is something that's so common amongst athletes who were going to retire this year, and the effort that they've put in and everything like that. And I wanted to ask as well, you mentioned having to put off motherhood when you did make the decision to go for the Olympics back in 2016. And obviously this is quite a common issue for female athletes across many sports when they are deciding whether to continue their professional athletic career. Has that been, kind of a nice, like a silver lining, I guess, of this whole tumultuous year?
Absolutely. And I just want to go back to what you said about it's been a common thread of athletes planning to retire this year. This Sport Climbing Australia, the National Federation, actually had a call where we spoke with Ian Chesterman, who's with the AOC, and he mentioned that there were 2 athletes who had already qualified for the Olympics and had decided to pull out. And that, for me, I think was the first time when I started seriously feeling like I had permission to consider not continuing. So these athletes that already had secured their spots, I hadn't secured my spot, they had already secured their spots, and they decided that something else was more important, really gave me permission to start considering if that was right for me. So I really appreciate you making that reference, because that was a bit of a pivotal point for me. And absolutely the fact that I can now pursue motherhood has been a silver lining. The other silver lining has actually been going back to work full time, because there's been a lot of challenges, which I won't go into out of courtesy of a lot of my work colleagues, but there's been a lot of challenges with me being part-time and trying to lead an organization being part-time. And going back full-time due to the pandemic, and then making the decision not to sort of continue on, has been a huge factor in repairing some of the relationships and becoming a stronger leader in my workplace as well.
Yeah, so Tiffany, since rock climbing is a recent addition to the Olympics, the AIS does not provide much funding to rock climbing athletes, I can imagine. This must have made it really difficult to prepare without easy access to like coaches, physio, or training facilities. And because you're representing Australia and based in Canada, how did you manage this?
Yes, you are right. It has been incredibly challenging. A lot of the athletes based in Australia, although the AIS doesn't give funding per se, they do give access to, for example, if I was in Brisbane, the Queensland Academy of Sport and sports physiologists and physio and all that sort of thing. So for me, it has been an added challenge living here. But I have a belief that if you put 100% of yourself into a dream, that the money will come. And indeed, that has been the case for me. I couldn't have survived on my part-time wage, and I really had to do quite a lot of seeking out sponsorships and crowdfunding, and I could not have done this without the support that I have had from individual donors, but also my sponsors. And I've never gone without because of a lack of, whether it's funding or a particular thing that I needed. Whenever I put it out there that I needed something, it has come, it has shown up for me. And I feel so grateful for the network of people who have been behind me, because I could not have done it without them. I wouldn't have survived without them. So all I can say is my support network. That's how I did it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I have another sort of different sort of question to ask. Climbing does seem to be a very male-dominated sport, and athletes that have broken through to the mainstream, mostly for me through movies like The Dawn Wall and Free Solo, tend to be male. As a female, embedded in the sport, super involved, obviously, do you think, is there a gender diversity issue, or is it simply a matter of there being more male climbers out there?
I actually think that it is more about media than it is about the actual sport. So if you go to a climbing gym, at least here in Vancouver, I would say it's pretty close to 50-50, maybe a little bit more weighted towards guys, but generally speaking, like it's fairly equal in terms of the people who are showing up to do the sport. And I'd just like to make mention at this time that there isn't a lot of visible non-binary or non-gender conforming folks in the gyms, which I would like to open up and say it would be great to see more of those coming in. But I also think that the media picks up on certain things when portraying athletes in general, but specifically sport climbers. And I think that, we were discussing before we went on air, Emily Harrington's recent send of Golden Gate, which is the route on El Cap, is great because it has taken the mainstream media in a different direction, but it's still listed as like the first female ascent. It's not being seen as necessarily an achievement in its own right. Like, this is a really hard route, and somebody did it. She's, I think, only the 5th person in the world to do it in under 24 hours. And it would be nice to have the portrayal be focused on the achievement rather than on the gender of the person who did the achievement. And most of the Dawn Wall and Free Solo, I don't know any women who are doing the things that were portrayed in those 2 movies. So yes, there were guys who were doing them, but I do think that the films were focused on the achievement. And that's what I would like to see more of, because there are some incredible female climbers who are doing incredible things. I think they just don't get as much of the exposure as a lot of guys do.
Yeah, so Tiffany, in addition to your rock climbing commitments, you are also the executive director of the New View Mental Health Society and the founder of Force of Nature Coaching. What do these roles involve, and why are they so important to you?
So New View Society is the organization that I run. We work people with severe and persistent mental illness in the non-medical supports that they need in their lives. So social recreational programming, employment, vocational support, community outreach, where we go and work with people in their homes, housing, and anything that is not related to the medical side of things. We work with people's strengths, not their weaknesses. We want them to lead a fulfilling life based on their individual circumstances, and their individual circumstances include a mental illness. My individual circumstances include that I'm an athlete. Other people may have a physical disability or some other physical illness that is part of their circumstances. And so that's what we try to focus on, is like, what do you want to achieve in your life and how do we support you do that? And for me, I fell in love with nonprofit management when I was working in England, and have never really looked back. Any of my forays into for-profit work, I've always been like, yeah, no, just confirms this isn't for me. And I've always had a really strong interest in mental health, mental illness, psychology. And so for me, this community-based organization was a really strong alignment with my values, and also really strongly aligned with the values of life coaching, which is Force of Nature coaching, my life coaching business. I do life, sport, and performance coaching. And the values that show up are around not thinking that people are broken and need to be fixed, but that people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, and that if we can give them the circumstances within which to succeed, that they will. And while my role at New View is not working frontline with our clients and members, it's providing what I like to call the skeleton or the structure that keeps the organization strong in order for all of our staff to go out and do the great work that they do.
Yeah, and that seems like such a great role, and two different organisations that are really important. And I just wanted to ask, lastly, Tiffany, before we let you go, what's next for you now that the Olympics bid is off? Are you just doing climbing recreationally now, and paying more efforts into your other things going on in your life?
So definitely motherhood is in the future. And I'm looking forward to that happening, but I'm not in a rush. So when that happens, it will be great. I definitely am investing more of myself into New View and looking forward to continuing on that journey. I have started applying to board roles so I can help with the governance of other nonprofit organizations and helping them be stronger. I have also reached out to the IFSC, which is the International Federation of Sport Climbing, to see if there is a working group to have climbing be involved in the Masters Games. Because while I may be done with an Olympic bid, I'm certainly not done with competition climbing. I have a very competitive spirit, and I think climbing would be a great fit for the World Masters Games, and I would like to be a part of facilitating that to happen so that I can continue to compete into my older age. I know that I'm not particularly old, but in an athlete world, when my competitors are 2 decades younger than me, it definitely makes me feel old.
Well, that's right. Some of the best Australian talent, at least, are teenagers still.
Yes.
So that's exciting to guess. I watch the next generation come up. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really, really appreciate it. And we wish you all the best with everything that you do have coming up for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm on social media. You can find me. I love getting messages from people, and would love to pass on any of my advice, experience, or holding space to hear your story. I love hearing people's stories. So
Absolutely. We'll mention them now. That was such a great interview. Tiffany is such an inspiring woman in sport, and we are so privileged to have been able to have this chat. Head to wispsports.com to find the show notes. You can follow Tiffany on Instagram at Tiffany Melius, that's Melius, and you can subscribe to her YouTube, which is also Tiffany Melius, and you can also check out Tiffany's blog, which is where she shared her whole Olympic journey and is a really good read, at tiffanyMelius.com/blog. We are at Ausswomen's Sport on all socials, and Wisp Sports is at Wisp Sports on all socials. Or if you prefer email over social media, you can go to info@wispsports.com. Thanks so much for listening to the show. We continue to speak to some amazing women in sport and are so grateful for their time. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another amazing guest.
Hi everyone, my name is Paula Van Gissenhoven and this is my song Paredes Invisibles from my new album Quien Soy, Lado A. It's available on Spotify, Deezer, or whichever platform you like most. You can also find me on social media as Paula Van Gissenhoven.
Dices otra vez que sí, pensando solamente en ti y el mundo entero riéndose de mí. Te alejas cada día más y yo, sin saber dónde estás, me queda claro siempre que